Hi, Philip. Thank you so much for speaking to me today. Could you give a little intro to yourself and a little bit about your background, please?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Philip. I am a designer at the Creative Lab. My background is I studied graphic design, uh, more like a traditional degree, I would say. But I always had an inclination towards 3D tools and more like tech-oriented stuff. So I started off as kind of really focused on like 3D design, 3D motion, using tools like Blender. I then wanted to kind of zoom out a little bit and focus more on like the holistic part of branding. So I started focusing more on like traditional stuff. So I worked in branding for a while still kind of taking advantage of like 3D skills, but more of a holistic approach. And then 10 months ago, I joined the Google Creative Lab as a Fiverr in the London office.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So you have made a really cool thing with vibe coding. So I wondered if you could give us a demo of what you've made.
Yeah, of course. Let me share. Cool. So this is my 3D agent demo that I made. What it is basically is it's a 3D character of myself that I made a while back, where I 3D scanned myself, and then I basically created a 3D scene where the character is able to walk around, so he can go to wherever I click, and then I'm using Gemini to kind of like power his reasoning in the background, so I can talk to him and he can kind of like reason through stuff in the scene, and do actions based on what I tell him. So even if we just say like, if we say hello, he'll kind of reason through it and then he'll wave at us. um, then obviously I was basically trying to like um, showcase agents in like the most human way, kind of inspired by the fact that the language we use to talk about agents is like very human. Like we use things like, like they're building stuff over here, they're hallucinating. Like the language is very human. So whenever I work with them, I always like picture like a human running around somewhere. So I thought like, okay, why not take advantage of like this 3D character and try and build it out. So then you can also
How did you scan yourself?
so this was a couple years back, like pre AI. So
Yeah.
it was like a very painstaking process back then, where like I we had like a red laser scanner, and it wasn't actually it could do like smaller objects really well. So I had to do two scans. I had to do like one of my body and then one of my head,
Right.
and, and then in 3D software I had to like painstakingly like join them together, um, go through like a whole like remeshing workflow, and it took like a week back then.
So just been waiting for this moment that it can get used in this situation.
Exactly. He can also like there are objects in the scene that he can sort of just like run into and interact with. So I can tell him to I can go like, hey. I can also have a mic, so I can just kind of talk to him. So I can say, can you go pick up the pear? I think it didn't catch on to the pear, so now I think he's gonna like he doesn't right. So now he didn't catch it. So so I'm gonna say it again. Can you go pick up the apple? Okay, so now he got it.
Wow.
And so now, because I wanted to like also show that you can kind of like duplicate them and have more of them in the scene. So I can also have him, if I tell this one to go over here, and then the one with the apple, I can tell him like, can you throw the apple to the agent that's further away from you? So that will make him like he will have to reason through all the steps. So he will have to like get the location of each of the agents. He'll have to figure out which one is further away, and then he has to calculate the distance and the power to like
Wow.
throw at him. So if I now say, can you throw the apple at the agent further away? Um, so yeah.
That's
He
like my
totally,
throw.
yeah, he totally missed them, but the
Wow.
intention was there.
And I think you said earlier on that you made this with Gemini CLI. So uh how did you set this up and how do you make it make those decisions and make those calculations?
Yeah, so I used to actually use AI Studio a lot, but
Hmm.
then this was kind of the first project where I had to figure out a bit of a different way because of all the different assets that I was working with. There was a lot of 3D models and a lot of like exporting and going back and forth, which is quite painful with AI Studio. So I had to figure out a way to kind of do all this locally, just on my machine.
Yeah.
So that's why I moved to AI Studio. And so the most important thing is basically the there's one API called to Gemini, and alongside that there's like a large system prompt that basically gives it all the instructions. Inside of that system prompt, there's like the memory, which kind of gives the agent the awareness of the room.
Hmm.
He knows that he's a 3D character in a space. Into that prompt, there's like the objects that are in the room that are injected into the prompt. So even though if the apple and the pear, if they move around the scene, those those coordinates of those objects constantly update.
Right.
There's also the React logic loop that explains like how he should go through the steps. So it's basically like, you know, find the distance of the apple. Once you find the distance of the apple, it kind of gives that response back to it. And then it's like, okay, now that I know where the apple is, I can walk to it. And now, and to trigger all these actions, he has tools for everything. So
Hmm.
once Gemini kind of arrives at a conclusion, like, oh, this is what I have to do, there's a tool that like triggers the animation. So if he reasons through all those steps and he's like, okay, I have to throw the apple at the second agent, there's a tool which is like throw apple, calculate distance, calculate throw power, and all these kind of tools that he triggers and uses to execute it.
Is tools similar to skills and conceptually?
Yes, yeah. Tools are more like it's the actual code that it's executing. So a tool is much more like a rigid, hard coded thing that it just runs. Skills are more like kind of trying to explain to the agent like how you should be going about doing things.
Great. This is really impressive.
Thank you. Should I also should I show you what he can do at the desk?
Yeah, let's do that desk demo.
So there's also a desk. So I can basically I can either click on him or I can tell him to go to the desk. So if I just seat him there, so now whenever he sits at the desk, he is now connect is basically under the hood is using the Google Workspace CLI to connect to the different Google Workspace tools. So I can tell him to basically access those tools and like write, um, you know, set an event in my calendar, write something in my docs, or write an email. I'll tell him like I'll have him stand here, and then I'll just say like send an email to you, and you send email to. I'll copy over your email. Ask how the interview is going. So now, so he goes through all the reasoning. He knows that in order to connect, he needs to go to the desk and open up Gmail and everything.
So nice. The icon as well, and then all of the little affordances you have for like what he's doing at each point is nice as well.
Yeah. And I think all those things kind of which is super nice about this like way of working is as you build these things, you kind of you always go like, oh, I wish it had this thing. Like I wish it gave me this feedback. And you just kind of like make them on the go. Like you don't have to plan that much ahead. You just kind of
Yeah.
intuitively
Uh,
like add things on.
and I've
So
got the email that worked.
good.
Thank you. If you were to spend more time on this, what other things would you like to try with it to enhance it?
So some one thing that I'm thinking about is obviously now like Gemini does all the reasoning in the back of
Hmm.
the like so it does all the reasoning and then it triggers specific tools to like execute the actions. But obviously it kind of the Gemini capability kind of ends whenever it triggers the tool. So like it will reason it does the reasoning, but then the actual animations, those are
Yeah.
all like preset animations. So like it triggers a running animation. So then he's running or he's picking up stuff. And like what I'm really curious about is like what would it take to actually have even the movements to be AI kind of powered and like
Mm.
just done on the go. So I started looking into like um, robotics models, which is basically that's what they're trying to solve. Like the luxury of the 3D space is the fact that you have like hyper specific coordinates of all the objects, and you can kind of like tell the character to go exactly to this place and pick up exactly this object. You don't have that luxury in the real world, and like that's what robotics is trying to solve. Is like if the robot sees an apple on the floor, like just from that visual, how can it go and pick it up?
Well,
um, and also like obviously has to deal with all the physics and everything.
yeah.
Uh, and so these these models are starting to like emerge now. So I'm trying to like see like how those could be like implemented, and can could the character actually go through even the actions? Could he kind of
Mm.
reason through them? And some of the robotics models that they now can the output they give you is basically they are kind of like the coordinates of like where to move the arm because they've been trained on like many robotics models. So I'm trying to see like, is there a way that that could start being integrated to this so that the Gemini kind of capability goes further than just the reasoning?
That's really interesting. I think I saw a thing recently where people were being paid to do like household chores and then film themselves doing it so that the AI could like train on
Yeah.
that data of how to move
Mhm.
through the physical 3D space, which I thought was
Yeah.
quite funny and terrifying.
Yeah.
You said that you used AI Studio and then you moved into using Gemini CLI.
Yeah. So it's basically it's a tool that you run in the terminal, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like the reason why I like it is it's kind of like at the core of your computer, and it's like you can kind of access everything through there. So it just makes sense to kind of be in that space.
Yeah.
Um, and I also really like once you get kind of over the initial like overwhelming aspect of the terminal, and it feels a bit overwhelming in the beginning. It is quite minimal. Like
Yeah.
it is just like a one simple prompt bar,
Yes.
and you're essentially talking to your computer.
Yeah, I actually had the same realization as you. I was a bit intimidated at first when doing some coding stuff with it. I was like, actually, it's just almost the same as the chat interface, and like you just back and
Yeah.
forth conversation with it.
Mhm.
So that was going to be my next question, actually. How much experience had you had before all of these AI and vibe coding tools came out doing stuff like this? I know you said you had experience with Blender, but obviously that's that
Mhm.
one specific tool that you have to learn. Like, so this experiment with Gemini CLI, is that your first sort of foray
Yeah.
into
So
that?
yeah, definitely. So obviously a lot of the work in this demo is like just classic 3D, like all the models, like the 3JS scene and everything. Like those are just like classic 3D meshes. So I had experience with handling 3D objects in like 3D
Hmm.
software, but I didn't have any experience with like making a website or like coding a website that would like implement all of these things. And so my entry point was definitely like AI Studio. But as I said before, like I then started to hit walls a little bit with like, okay, like now I want to actually use assets that I've made myself in 3D and like use them and on a website. And it was just like really hard to like get them over to AI Studio. So then I kind of just started looking into like, okay, what are the tools that would allow me to do that? And
Yeah,
Gemini CLI kind of seemed to be the best.
nice. And then what other experiments have you done since then? Is this the main thing you've been working on, or have you tried any other sort of AI vibe coding experiments recently?
So I'm using vibe coding just like a lot internally for like internal work.
Yeah.
This was just like my own kind of weekend project. So It's always nice to do it because like you have an idea and then you're like that's also the magic of it. Like you can just do it
Yeah.
really quickly
Yeah.
and then you know you see if it resonates and then if it does, then like it can kind of turn into projects internally even. But so I use it a lot for internal work, and occasionally I'll do something like this on the side.
Yeah. And how do you think that these tools have changed your workflow, sort of day to day? Do you think they've had a big impact? Do you think that they are actually helpful?
Definitely, I would say I spend most of my time. Well, obviously, it depends on the project, but so now I'm doing a lot of projects that like really take advantage of these things. But I would say I'm in the Gemini CLI like pretty much most of the day now.
Right.
Uh, and so, just for example, like as a designer, like you'd obviously like design screens in Figma, but then when you have to start thinking about like interactions, that would you'd have to like just kind of like think about it or do storyboards or work with someone that can bring your prototype to life, and then you can kind of like feel the interactions and then kind of go back and forth. Now you can just build the thing right away and you can get to those decisions a lot faster. So I don't have to like a lot of the times you kind of get to the point where you need to like feel something to make a decision and you can't just sit and design it in Figma. You need to like, okay, where would I want to click? So that's really useful.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, like the intuition of knowing whether something's right or not, but also not being able to properly, or it takes a long time to actually make it real so that you can see if it works in real life or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally
And it
agree.
also it saves a lot of time just by, you then don't have to bother your friends that know how to code to like um
Yeah.
build you prototype just for you to decide like realize, oh, okay, actually wasn't the
Yes.
direction.
I totally agree with that. Like being able to do everything myself without bothering anyone or asking anyone. But then
Yeah.
also sometimes I have in my head, a really great idea. And then I start actually working on it and putting it together. I'm like, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. But you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
fail fast and then learn and then make
Exactly.
something better in the end, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also prove a lot of stuff yourself now. You can also use it the other way around where you can be like, oh, look, this works. Like you see this is clearly like working. So let's try and actually like
Yeah.
build it.
One other question. So you said you had a background in graphic designs and you did a
Mhm.
bit of branding. So a lot of that will be more sort of static screens
Mhm.
or visuals. Have you tried using any tools for that type of work? How do you find it in that? Because obviously the 3D stuff, the websites and the actual software works well, as we know. But how does it work with more of the classic graphic design type of?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of designers are now really like, eager about using Figma in combination with vibe coding tools and
Yeah,
like using MCP, bringing the designs quickly, able to have like the surgical precision in Figma, and then like also bringing it to life really quickly. I think that's like something that I think designers are really like excited about. So I've been exploring those. Like, okay, like if I design something in Figma, how quickly can I then make it into a prototype? Those kind of things. Obviously, Google now also released Stitch that I really want
yeah,
to try out. I haven't had that much time to look into it, but I think both of those fields of like design, like designing on a canvas and then like vibe coding, they're kind of like converging together.
yeah.
Uh, and I think, yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been playing with Figma Make as well, which is that.
Mhm.
And then also the Figma MCP is connected to Gemini CLI and things like that,
Yeah.
which, yeah, is nice to be able to pull that together. Because I was actually saying to somebody the other day that I feel like for engineers, their coding, their ability to code and the speed of which they can code has exponentially grown.
Yeah.
Writers are the same, like you can write and refine things a lot quicker, but design is slightly more difficult in that you still need to spend a lot of time up front thinking and planning and putting stuff
Yeah.
together. You
Hmm.
can generate like okay uh like iterations of a thing, but it still
Hmm.
needs that. But I think that where value is in those connectors with tools like Figma, MCP into the
Mhm.
prototyping bit and into the engineering handover documents and things. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
been fun to experiment with that. I agree.
yeah, totally. Um, and also like when you work in when you work in Figma, like when you just want to make a design and you have really surgical precision, in
Mm.
that sense, you can really like move at the speed of thought. You're just like, okay, this would be positioned here, and like you
Yeah.
can do that. With vibe coding, you can get to interaction really fast, but the design is still really painful for a designer. And I'm trying to like not get too caught up on it because then you can really like spend 20 minutes trying to explain to Gemini, like, I really want this button to be here,
Yeah.
and please can you make the corners, can you align the corner radius of these
Yeah.
buttons? But I try to tell myself like, no, this is not a good use of time, even though I would love for these to look better. So I think it's, Figma has the surgical precision, but it doesn't have the built interactive element. And then vibe coding is like you can get to these like alive feeling things really quickly. So I would love for them to just be a little bit closer together.
Yes, you've articulated my point very well. That's exactly it. Yeah. An hour trying to get a specific button to, I don't know, move or change color, and then it breaks everything else in the meantime where
Yeah,
you're just
exactly.
hyper focused on that one tiny thing that won't change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can end with a more of a philosophical type of
Yeah.
question. So, into the future,
Mhm.
what are you most excited or nervous about when it comes to AI and design, especially for yourself being new to your career
Mhm.
and the journey in design?
Yeah, I'm really excited about just being able to do a lot of things myself,
Mhm.
and like I have control over the outcome. And okay, like I knew how to design a website, but now I can also see what the interaction would feel like, or maybe even build a super rough prototype. So just being able to do more is definitely something I'm excited about. Also, for young people in general, no one's really an expert in this field. You can take advantage of that and be really valuable by learning these tools really quickly and on top of things. I know when I came into the industry, I had this feeling of in 3D, for example, wow, there's people that have been in this field for 20 years, and you see this like, oh wow, it's going to take me a while to get there. I think what's really exciting about these tools, no one's an expert, and everyone's just kind of learning, and you can be valuable really quickly, I think.
That is an
Uh,
amazing outlook. Yeah, totally agree with that. That's a really good way to look at it. You're totally right.
yeah, thanks. And nervous, I don't know. Obviously like, there's a lot happening, so you're always trying to keep up with everything. I think that's one of the reasons why I leaned more into technology in general. I was really a brand designer that knew how to do 3D, and now I'm really leaning into learning how the technology works, just because I feel like it makes me less nervous. You actually understand how the things work. So maybe I feel subconsciously that's why I'm leaning into it, just because I want to understand it. And it makes me less nervous when a new tool comes out and I can understand what it actually means. I'm like, okay, you can kind of judge how big of a deal it is if you understand the thing more. And it starts to feel less like magic, and you're more like, okay, I know what this means. In the world of AI, a lot of new features are just new markdown file somewhere, in the folder structure, and you're like, okay, fine, like, you know, um, it's cool, but it's not to be about or change everything.
That's a really good way to look at it. And I think that will make other people feel less nervous too, because the rate of change is overwhelming for everyone. But the good thing as well is it doesn't take too much time or effort to catch up every time there is a new tool, especially like you say, if you're incrementally learning this conceptual model of how things
Mhm.
fit together and how technology is built and how things work. Each change that comes isn't too far from that. It's just maybe more powerful or there's a
Mhm.
different human computer interface to do it. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
totally.
really good take.
Yeah, and I mean, even if there are new tools like new vibe coding tools, the general paradigm of where you within is sort of similar. You open a new tool, it's like, okay, the button might be on the other side of the screen, but it still does the same thing. So conceptually understanding the space, I think, can ground you a bit more.
True. Yeah. And I think that what you said earlier on about being new where you have the advantage that actually you've got more of the appetite to learn because you're in that phase of your career. And I work with a lot of different people, different roles, different experiences or like time in the industry. And you can tell the difference between someone who wants to constantly keep learning. Like some people started doing UX design when you were working in Adobe Illustrator. That tool's quite hard to learn. I'm glad I started more in
Yeah, yeah.
the sketch period of time because that's easier to pick up. But now actually, the tools are not the blocker. The blocker is just your capacity for trying new things and your ideas and your ability to wrangle the capabilities into something like what you've done with this, where you took all of the different bits. You took the 3D model bit and then you took the logic of Gemini and fitted it all together. Yeah, really, really interesting to talk to you and very
Thank you.
excited to see the stuff you made. Thank you so much. Maybe before you go, one last question is, do you have any ideas for what to make next for your personal experiments?
Um, like kind of what I said about exploring the like robotics side of the models,
Hmm.
because I know like the models that are now starting to come out are like they have like the spatial reasoning as well. So that's kind of something I'm keeping an eye on and seeing like how I could implement that.
Great.
But yeah, it might change next week. You never know.
I know.
Thank you so much. No, it was great. Thanks for getting in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.